won bronze. Paris, we won a rocket.
Good to see that, women cricket is getting more excited and everybody is looking up to that.
And these stories need to be told.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ananya Datta and I'm back with another edition of Race to Power, a show where we talk about everything elections. Here's what we have lined up for you. You should know the election season is approaching when the government surprises you with petrol and diesel price cuts. If you're watching us from India, this could be your New Year gift. If we had to tell you about the American Civil War, we would say that it started in 1861, lasted for 4 years, killed over 600,000 people and became the reason to criminalize slavery forever. But if you ask the Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley, it decided how the government should function. We are as confused as you are. Stay tuned to find out what else she said. Now, in a fresh update just coming in, sources in the Indian government suggest that the Modi administration is all set to announce a significant cut in petrol and diesel prices. Sources have informed Zee Media that the announcement could come as early as this weekend, which is the New Year's, giving relief to millions of people of India. According to sources, the Petroleum Ministry has prepared a proposal incorporating the cuts ranging from Rs 8 to Rs 10 per litre. Now it's waiting for a green signal from the Prime Minister's office. While the ministry is believed to be positive that lower procurement of crude would offset any losses, the move is being seen as the government's all-out effort to reach out to the poor ahead of next year's general elections. Parties in the opposition have been rallying behind issues like rising fuel costs and higher cost of living. The fuel cut announcement would also be in tune with the party's new slogan, Prime Minister's Guarantee, focusing on 4 special groups: the poor, farmers, women and youth. Earlier in November, the government had also announced the extension of the Prime Minister's Food Security Scheme for the poor. It's a scheme providing free ration to 8 crore poor people in the country for the next 5 long years.
वो 100% पूरे किए जाएंगे।
Now, on the other hand, the opposition seems to be grappling with its own challenges. The Indian National Democratic Inclusive Alliance, or India for short, seems to be speaking in different voices when it comes to the prime ministerial face. While some parties are pitching their own leaders for the prime minister's post, others are urging the alliance to contest the polls without a PM face. In the latest, Bihar Chief Minister and leader of the Janata Dal United Party, Nitish Kumar, arrived in Delhi for a 2-day national executive meeting. And at the Delhi office of the JDU, posters were set up of Kumar, pitching him as the prime ministerial face of the India alliance. The text on the poster loosely translates to, "The state has recognized and now the nation will also recognize." These hints at the party's ambition of seeing their leader as the next Prime Minister of India. Kumar had expressed his desire to be Prime Minister during the very first meeting of the India Alliance. And the poster is a public expression of that aspiration within the alliance. Meanwhile, Nationalist Congress Party Chief Sharad Pawar reiterated that it was not necessary for the opposition India bloc to announce a prime ministerial face. Pawar drew a parallel to the 1977 general election in India, when the then opposition did not put forward a prime ministerial candidate. Then, of course, there is Mallikarjun Kharge, the current president of the Indian National Congress. His name was pitched for the PM's face by several members of the India Alliance just last week. Supporters of Kharge as the PM face include the Trinamool Congress's Mamata Banerjee and also Aam Aadmi Party's chief Arvind Kejriwal. All this indicates just how diverse the India Alliance is and how difficult a job it is going to be for all the parties, 28 of them, to come together, rallying behind one leader to take on the incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Nikki Haley is yet again in the eye of the storm, and she has only herself to be blamed here. The Republican presidential candidate is drawing flack for her comments. When asked about the reason for the civil war in America, Haley failed to mention the key reason, that was slavery. Haley was speaking at a town hall in New Hampshire. Instead of mentioning slavery, Haley talked about the role of the government.
Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
Thank you. And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
She says, what do you want me to say about slavery? US President Joe Biden replied to the question on his social media account that the American Civil War was all about slavery. The comments before the election year, Nikki Haley is currently running second to Republican poster boy Donald J. Trump. Haley had a boost in public polls and gained support from major GOP donors, this including the Koch brothers, who dipped in after her standout debate performances.
How do we lift up everybody?
Now on this show, Race to Power, we have been telling you about the Taiwanese claims of Chinese interference in its upcoming presidential polls. The allegations range from sponsoring trips of pro-Beijing candidates to its aggressive military posturing ahead of the polls. China has now reacted to the Taiwanese government's allegations. Attacking Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, the Chinese Defense Ministry has accused it of quote-unquote hyping up the claims of interference. Beijing accused the party of trying to stoke confrontations and manipulate the elections. One of the more closely watched aspects of Taiwan's January 13th vote is the presidential candidate's handling of the relations with China. Taiwanese officials have repeatedly raised concerns about election interference and misinformation. The vote also comes against the backdrop of an escalating pressure campaign by Beijing, which claims the island as its own territory. Throughout this month, Taiwan has called out Chinese spy balloons across the sensitive median line separating Taiwan from China.
Under this situation,
we have to forge bipartisan and unified support for Taiwan. We cannot afford to let Taiwan become an issue of partisan difference in American politics.
The DPP authorities have been hyping up that China's mainland is interfering in its elections. These are all familiar pages from their old playbook. It is to stoke confrontation and manipulate this election, but more and more people in Taiwan see through these tactics.
In a televised policy presentation earlier this week, the DPP frontrunner candidate Lai Ching-te reiterated warnings of election interference by Beijing. He accused the opposition party of quote-unquote borrowing China's power to gain ruling power. The KMT candidate, Ho Yu-yi, who has promised closer ties with Beijing, has in turn called the election a choice between war and peace. Now, Hong Kong's primary opposition party has officially shut its doors. The once prominent Civic Party cleared its headquarters and shuttered its doors on the 15th of December. Founded back in 2006, the Civic Party, nicknamed the Barristers' Party, was made up of attorneys, academics and other professionals. The party promoted democratization through political reform. But now the party and its leaders said that they are quitting active politics.
After the final meeting, after my resignation as a director of the Civic Party Limited, I would refrain absolutely from commenting on local politics.
Everything changed for the party in the year 2019 after China imposed a sweeping national security law. It suppressed dissent after massive pro-democracy protests rocked Hong Kong. 3 Civic Party members were jailed, elected politicians were unseated, and a former lawmaker was listed as a most wanted fugitive. Faced with a leadership vacuum, the party decided to disband in May. In the final months of 2023, it donated its office furniture and campaign loudspeakers and stripped bare its walls of newspaper clippings and party signatures.
This was the large conference room where the executive committee held its meetings. And here was a smaller conference room where we use it for the chairman reception of guests and also during election time.
Beijing's state television has called the party an anti-China destabilizing organization. Dennis Kwok, one of the Civic Party's unseated lawmakers who now lives overseas, has $128,000 bounty on his head. With the dissolution of the Civic Party, Hong Kong is virtually devoid of any political opposition. And speaking of no opposition, let's shift our focus to Bangladesh, where a court jailed a former Air Force chief and a former minister. The latest convictions add to a long list of incarcerated political opponents of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina ahead of next month's elections. Altaf Hussain Chaudhry headed the Air Force till the year 1995 and later joined the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The BNP is the country's main opposition party. Chaudhry and former BNP Water Minister Hafizuddin Ahmed were among 8 people jailed by a Dhaka court for inciting violent protests in the year 2011 that saw BNP supporters indulging in arson. They were sentenced to jail for 21 months each. The opposition has rejected the case as quote-unquote baseless, false and fabricated. It has accused the courts of following the government's instructions and imprisoning Hasina's opponents ahead of the January 7th poll. Bangladesh's main opposition parties, the BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami, are boycotting the vote along with dozens of smaller parties, saying the national elections will be neither free nor fair. Both parties have staged huge protests this year, demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Hasina and appointing a neutral caretaker government to oversee the elections. The BNP even gave a non-cooperation call to the people, urging them to boycott the polls and refrain from election duties. Even asked them to not pay the taxes. At least 11 people have died in the demonstration so far. The BNP says over 25,000 opposition party members have been arrested since September. including the party's entire senior leadership in Bangladesh. Hasina's government disputes all of those figures, saying only 11,000 had been detained. As if that's a small number. Prime Minister Hasina has presided over significant economic growth in Bangladesh since being elected in the year 2009. But her opponents say that she has ruled with an iron fist and her security forces indulge in rampant human rights abuses. 2 years ago, Washington sanctioned the elite Rapid Action Battalion police unit and many of its top officers over allegations of human rights abuses. The US has also threatened to sanction officials responsible for electoral malpractices. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the recently held presidential election continues to be mired in controversy. In the latest, an opposition leader has been accused the Congolese police of using live bullets to break up a protest in the capital city of Kinshasa. This after the government banned demonstrations against last week's polls. Congolese Interior Minister said that the protests were aimed at harming the electoral process, but despite the ban, the opposition called its supporters to gather at the National Assembly and march to the headquarters of the country's Electoral Commission.
We said we were going to demonstrate to say no to this electoral robbery, this sham election. I told you a long time ago that Mr. Kadima, an election observation specialist, was preparing chaos, and here we are.
Dozens of riot police were stationed in the area, preventing the protests from taking place. Officers fired tear gas canisters at the protesters, and also opposition leader said during a standoff with the police, a bullet landed near him while he was barricaded inside his headquarters.
A policeman dropped that, and that was the shell casing that fell where I was. I was in the fire boom. Boom! It fell right next door, and I picked that up.
The demonstrators also threw rocks at the police as they demanded a repoll of the presidential election.
Some police officers were injured by stone throwing, and a few minors were also injured by stone throwing by intruders, which is what we feared. And that's why we had said we had to listen to the voice of the authorities, who had to take other necessary measures to control the march.
Just for a little background, international observers have alleged that the election was extended illegally. Many polling stations were late in starting and some didn't open at all. In parts of Congo, people were still voting 5 days after the election. The poll results are expected before the new year. In Argentina, the newly elected president's troubles are mounting as he tries to navigate the country's turbulent economic waters. President Javier Milei has turned to a shock package of measures that he hopes will eventually stabilize the economy. But Argentinians don't seem to agree. Here's a report.
Decades of debt and financial mismanagement have brought Argentina down to its knees. Inflation has surged over 160%, and 40% of the country is in poverty. Taking drastic measures, newly elected President Milei has unveiled a deregulation program for the ailing economy. The new decree changes or eliminates over 300 rules, including those on rent and labor practices. Elected last month, Milei took office 10 days ago. He had warned that an economic shock treatment is the only solution he had, and that the situation will get worse before it improves. But Milei's measures have been greeted by widespread protests. thousands took to the streets in Buenos Aires, calling on Argentina's courts to declare the measures unconstitutional.
We present our claim to the National Labour Justice in order to obtain a ruling that declares the unconstitutionality of the decree of necessity and urgency.
Protesters gathered near the Congress to voice their discontent. Banging pots and pans, they stormed gates and waved the national flag. The decree is set to come into force on Friday. It challenges the powers of the unions that have favoured workers till now. It also restricts the right to strike in essential activities like hospital services, education and transportation.
This is a decree that takes away goods, services and the possibility of growth from society, and it will even end up taking away someone's plate of food from their table. And the answer they give you is a security protocol to beat those who come to demonstrate, and they take away the possibility of organizing a protest. It is the most we have seen during democracy in terms of totalitarianism and authoritarianism.
The decree has generated several complaints. It may encounter obstacles in the Congress, where Milei's party has very limited representation. Remember, his administration has already devalued Argentina's peso by over 50% and announced huge cuts in state subsidies of fuel and transport. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's move on to Serbia now, where anti-government protests have rocked the country. The opposition has said it will blockade the Serbian capital of Belgrade. And that will be done on Friday to protest alleged electoral fraud. As we have been telling you on this show, Race to Power, Serbian opposition groups are contesting the results of the December 17th parliamentary and local elections. The Belgrade blockade will start at noon, but roadblocks will be lifted on Saturday to allow the crowd in another protest. Protesters have erected sporadic roadblocks in Belgrade, calling for the results to be annulled. Just on Sunday evening, protesters tried to storm the Belgrade City Hall, while police pushed them back with pepper spray.
Like every night, I am here because I support protests against millennial election theft. Really abnormal situation which I hope we will be able to internationalize and inform the world, especially Europe and the United States, that here something very unusual is happening.
Now, India's main opposition party, the Indian National Congress, has launched their 2024 campaign with a mega rally in Nagpur. The campaign was launched on the party's 139th foundation day. As we leave you with these powerful, and power play is our segment's name, visuals of the day, we also wish you, on behalf of Race to Power's team, a very happy New Year.
पाटिल जी स्टेज पे ये जो आपने किया मुझे अच्छा नहीं
अजय माखनजी नागपूर येथे होत असलेल्या आजच्या नेते मल्लिकार्जुन खरगे साहेब आपल्या सर्वांचे नेते आदरणीय राहुलजी, त्याचप्रमाणे आपले प्रभारी रमेशजी, चेनिसालाजी,